Ladies and gentlemen, I'm speaking to you today and beyond you, to all French citizens, because a legitimate sentiment has pushed me to do so. I understand the questions that are being asked. I understand the need for clarification, and I will do so. I will do so because I have nothing to hide. I will do so because I cannot accept the accusations, and the baseless accusations, that have been targeted at me after 32 years of political life. 32 years without any judicial problem, 32 years of irreproachable ethical behavior. I would like to tell all my fellow countrymen and women that over all these years I have worked for my country without ever breaking the law and without ever contradicting my values. Today, as a candidate for the presidential election, I'm facing an incredibly violent attack. To my knowledge, this has never occurred before. This is unprecedented under the Fifth Republic. And I would like to say strongly from the very beginning, it's the candidate for the presidential election of the right and of the center who is aimed at, who is targeted today. And I fully assume all my responsibility. All the facts that have been mentioned are legal and transparent. I was questioned for 4 hours by the police, Penelope, my wife, for 5 hours. We told them everything. We answered all their questions. The reality of the facts are as follows. Yes, I employed my wife as an employee. She then worked for my replacement member of parliament, and then she became my parliamentary assistant again later on. So she occupied this position for 15 years altogether. And she was paid on average, on a monthly basis, €3,677 net per month. A perfectly justifiable salary for a person who is a graduate in arts and in law. Figures of up to €1 million have been bandied about to create a sensation, forgetting that this amount was a gross amount. Have you ever seen somebody's remuneration, cumulative remuneration over 15 years, as the gross salary is always much greater than the net salary, and my family has been unjustly attacked in this regard. This job was described as fictitious, and a lot of so-called experts have decreed what a parliamentary assistant must do, or not do. All elected officials know that this job covers a whole range of tasks. They know that it is not limited and cannot be limited to drawing up laws in the offices of the National Assembly in Paris, and they know that this job requires a whole series of modest actions by the parliamentary assistant in the shadows, alone. And they may seem banal to some people, but these tasks are indispensable for the functioning of local democracy. During all these years, my wife took charge of all those simple but essential tasks. She, with my secretary, Sylvie Fourmont, who managed my mail. She managed my diary. For local events, inaugurations, sports events, cultural events, and ceremonies, she worked on my speeches in the county of La Sarthe. She represented me in local cultural events. She also received and sent to companies the CVs and requests for jobs sent to me by the inhabitants of La Sarthe. She processed any claims, any complaints by my constituents when they faced administrative problems. The list of what she did doesn't stop there. Her salary was perfectly justified because her work was indispensable to my activities as an elected official. This work she did also for my replacement MP when I became a minister, a government minister. I wanted her to do that. I wanted to preserve the link with my constituency, and it is my wife who played this essential role. People say she didn't have a pass to enter the National Assembly. That means she didn't have a job. A lot of employees, a lot of people who work in the constituencies don't have a pass to enter the National. No personal email address. That doesn't mean she didn't have a job. We know that this is often the case. I also know that a lot of comments have been made on my wife's statement that she has never been involved in politics. A parliamentary assistant does work in the field of politics, but the politics is actually undertaken by the elected officials. At the last elections, because she loves local politics, Penelope decided to be elected as a municipal councillor, a local councillor. An interview in English, which she gave many years ago, which has been quoted out of context, in which she explained that she has never been my assistant. Yes, she has never been subordinate as my subordinate. She has always been, first and foremost, my work companion and my collaborator. Penelope has never claimed to be in the limelight. She has worked discreetly, refusing to speak in my place, as some wives of politicians do. And today, she is being accused of seeking the limelight, and I say that her way of working was dignified, so let's not exaggerate, let's not judge the words that she made in an interview which do not correspond to 30 years of life. I employed two of my children who worked for 15 months in 2005 and 2006, and one of them for 6 months and the other as parliamentary employees for a monthly net salary of 3,000 euros each. Nothing was hidden. All the job contracts were legal and are legal. The amounts received were declared to the tax and were taxable, and the amounts of remuneration respected the limits which are given, the credits that are given to each member of parliament. Members of parliament are allowed to work with whoever they deem has their trust and the required skills. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, all of this was legal. But does that mean that from a moral point of view, I have nothing to reproach myself? This ethical question is so important that I have to examine my conscience in this regard and vis-à-vis the French, and only the French will decide, will judge. It is not up to the media to judge me. It is for the French to judge me. It is for the French to decide. The most important courage in politics is to recognize any mistakes you make. Working with your family in politics is a practice which the French now reject. What was acceptable in the past is no longer accepted today. By working with my wife and my children, I gave priority to a relationship of trust, which today is called into question. It was a mistake. I deeply regret having made this mistake, and I would like to apologize to the French citizens. Like many other parliamentarians, I have acted in line with customs and legal customs, and today our fellow citizens don't want this practice to continue. 3 years ago, I put an end to all political collaboration with the members of my family. Except, and this is not the case of all those who are criticizing me today, the system needs to be reformed. If it needs to be reformed, let's reform it by opening up the debate on the conditions in which parliamentarians do their job and how their teams work. I would like to remind you that I clearly indicated under great pressure from my fellow parliamentarians that I will not allow parliamentarians to have several elected mandates. In other words, the status of parliamentarians needs to be clarified. I have nothing to hide. I will publish on the internet this evening a table showing what the income which my wife earned. And I will also publish the information which I gave the authorities in December. My assets are made up of my home in La Sarthe, which is valued to be worth 750,000 euros. I have a 44% stake in my father's house in the Basque country, worth 130,000 euros, and 1/3 of the value of his home in the Sarthe, which is worth 41,000 euros. I am not subject to the tax paid by wealthy people. Some people have joked about my bank account. Let's look at my bank account in detail. My wife and I are married under a community of wealth. Our wealth. We have a number of insurance contracts, savings accounts, current accounts, which we have in our names, some of which we share, and we have various savings passbooks. All these accounts are in a branch of the Crédit Agricole in Sablé-sur-Sarthe, in the county of the Sarthe. As regards my company, between 2012 and 2016, I legally gave conferences, lectures in many countries. I advised companies, among them the AXA Insurance Company, Fimalac Company, Concours. I was a member of the supervisory board of the Lucol and Astéry company, and I was there a consulting advisor. The list of my customers does not contain a Russian government or the Russian government or Russian company, and all the lectures which I have given in Russia were given free of charge. I have always made transparency a rule of my life. When I was Prime Minister, I tightened up the rules on transparency and ethics. I restricted use of the aircraft belonging to the state. I also clarified the rules governing flats and apartments occupied by ministers. I punished ministers who were excessive, who spent excessively. And regarding the size of the apartment which I had when I was Prime Minister, René Dosier visited the apartment, and he's an authority who is well known, and he can bear witness to the fact that I did, in fact, give very accurate description of the flat which I occupied as Prime Minister. So everything is on the table. So transparency should apply to everybody. Everybody must be treated fairly and be treated by the media in the same way. The debate today must focus on my political action and on my project. All the rest is an operation which aims to distract our fellow citizens from the real challenges facing this election. The purpose is to make it very difficult for the electors who voted in the primaries, who freed themselves from the system. They put me at the top. They elected me because I have a program which will break with the past. I'm the only one who can do that. I would like to tell the millions of French citizens who have chosen me that their choice will be respected. Nobody can deprive them of their choice, of their voice. The system requires, as during the primaries, that nobody can decide on the results in the place of the electors. So I have been described as a conservative, whereas in fact I am proposing a break with the past. I have been told as a member of the elite class, but in fact I'm the only one who can really come up with the right solutions. Our danger is to entrust our future to the extreme right, which is led by a family which has no program and which is made up of a group of personalities who are fascinated by a guru produced by the system we have. What we are experiencing today is a desperate attempt to organize a face-to-face race between these two powers. Does this mean that the left has no responsibility for what it has done during the 5 years of President Hollande's mandate? Does France no longer have any problems with Islamist terrorism, whereas the pressure on our country by Islamists is still very strong? Is there no problem of unemployment, of over-indebtedness, of excessive charges? Are there no problems of education? Nothing will diverge me, will set me away from my will to restore France's position and to give the French hope. I have been chosen by millions of French citizens, and I am not the candidate only of a political party. Nobody can legitimately call into question the vote of our voters in the primary election. That's why from this evening, I announced this evening that a new campaign is beginning today. From this evening, I will be holding a meeting of my campaign committee. Tomorrow, I will hold a meeting of parliamentarians. And tomorrow, I will be in the city of Troyes with François Barouin. And on Thursday, I will be in Poitiers with Jean-Pierre Raffarin. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, it is with renewed energy and determination that I will be campaigning in the next few weeks, and because France's destiny is at stake. I am now at your disposal to answer your questions. I would like to clarify, I would like to make it clear, I will answer no questions regarding judicial proceedings underway, which there is an inquiry which is being held. I have indicated that I answered the questions of the investigators for 5 hours. It's not, the media are not a tribunal. Mr. Prime Minister, you have just presented your excuses to the French. Do you feel that you are still the best candidate to win the presidential elections, or are you a handicap for the right? I'm the only candidate capable of enabling our country to implement a break with the past. I have listened to a lot of people, I have listened to the judgments of the French, and I know that the French reprove. Many of our citizens reprove what, after 10 days of a media campaign, 10 days, during which the accusations, only the accusers have been speaking. I will not give you the list of all the rumors that have been bandied about. As some people said that as a Prime Minister, I had my home listed as a historic monument, and so on and so forth. The truth is that in spite of all that, the majority of right-wing French citizens want me to continue defending my project based on a break with the past. The French of the right don't want to have to choose between Marine Le Pen and Mr. Macron, between an extreme left program and a program which which only calls for more public spending. I'm the only candidate who can enable France to be reborn, to recover. Perhaps the violence of the attacks against me have strengthened, in fact, my determination. So my cool anger will give me even more strength to defend my point of view. Mr. Fillon, you said on the 28th of August last year, there's no point of talking about authority when you have nothing to reproach yourself. Today, given the excuses you've just given to the French, do you consider yourself still as somebody who is irreproachable, and that do you think you still have the legitimacy to ask the French to make any efforts? Yes, I have complied with the law. I was elected for the first time to Parliament in 1981. I perhaps took more time than necessary to understand the changes that have occurred in French society. And yet, I have not broken the law at any time. I have nothing to reproach myself in terms of complying with the law. Yes, I consider myself today to be able to implement a project, including a project which requires and is based on the authority of the President of the Republic and the state. Do I have the legitimacy to ask the French to make an effort? I'm not asking the French to make an effort. I'm asking that there should be work for all French people, that the French people should have more purchasing power. I want them to increase their security. I want France to recover. I don't want France to continue as it is today, in a situation where there are 6 million people unemployed, 9 million people under the poverty line, 2 million young people who are neither in training, nor at school, nor in work. The fight against terrorism has not been conducted with all the necessary vigor, notably as regards our foreign policy. I'm not asking the French to make efforts. I'm asking the French to help me to restore the country, to help the country to recover. Are you convinced, and are you certain that no judicial judgment will counter your strategy? Yes, I'm absolutely sure of that. I know what I have done because I have a clear conscience, and because I have always practiced total transparency, notably vis-à-vis the people responsible for the ongoing inquiry. Good afternoon, RTL. Mr. Prime Minister, did your wife, Penelope, know that she had a job as a parliamentary assistant? When she says, and writes, in 2007, she said, "I have never been my husband's assistant," does that mean that she says that I've never been my husband's parliamentary assistant? Have you thought of reimbursing the money? How can you imagine that my wife, who is an intelligent woman, a graduate, a responsible person, how can you imagine that she's unaware of the work that she does for me or has done for me? How can you imagine that my wife, who has been working with me for nearly 30 years, mainly in the county of La Sarthe and in my constituency, that she has done so unknown to herself and unwillingly? Yes, my wife was fully aware, and that she was working for me and with me. When she made that statement in 2007, which was repeated in an accusation on a program, somebody knowingly took words out of context. And it was an English broadcast, an English language broadcast aimed at British listeners or viewers. And the topic of the interview was, "I will not be another Cheryl Blair." And the journalist who interviewed my wife personally has got in touch with my wife since then to say how shocked she has been by the use that has been made of that interview. Why would I pay back the money earned by my wife through her legitimate work? I would like to ask you the question. I said earlier that I understand that public opinion has evolved regarding employment of family members by parliamentarians. I regret not having understood this earlier. I said earlier that I will participate in reforming the status of parliamentarians, and my wife has worked and earned the money, and she has provided evidence and proof of that work. Therefore, in my view, there is no doubt, there's no need for me to reimburse the money. Last week, you said that there was a constitutional coup d'etat. Do you maintain that accusation? Do you still have confidence in the justice system? How can I not ask myself a number of questions? A very violent press campaign against me, orchestrated just when I have been designated after primary elections as the candidate of the right, at a time when the right has no other credible candidate. an inquiry has been opened by the financial prosecutor's office, who probably is not competent to do so in 24 hours in a very short time. And finally, this afternoon, the secrecy of professional secrecy was violated by an evening newspaper. Only the police inquiries, members of the financial prosecutor's office, have access to the minutes, to not the lawyers. So the secrecy, professional secrecy, has been violated by people responsible for the inquiry, who have all been appointed by the government. And I think a lot of French people today understand that there is people are obviously worried about what has happened. On the 26th of January, you said that you hired your wife in 1997. And you added that before that, she worked for you free, without being paid. She had been working for you since 1981, when you were elected. A few days later, we learned that her first job contracts date from 1988. Did you lie to the TF1 channel? You're from Mediapart, are you? I have never had a tax adjustment, by the way. I've never had, my taxes have never been called into question. As regards your question, I'd like to say something in this regard. I would never have been imagined of being accused of what I've been accused of. I'm an honest man, and this is the reason why this accusation came out like a thunder in the sky, sudden thunder in the sky, out of the blue. It came out of the blue, and this destabilized me. These accusations destabilized me, because I just couldn't imagine that it would happen, that this would happen. So yes, my first responses were not very clear. It took me 5 days to recover all the pay slips of my employees in Parliament in order to assess the situation. Yes, my wife has been working for me since 1981, but she started to be paid in 1988. The only figures I had were those provided by the Canard Enchaîné newspaper. After 5 days of investigations, I was able to reconstruct my wife's professional career, which began 20 years ago, and this afternoon on my website I will be publishing all the work contracts of my wife with the dates and the amounts of remuneration that she received. You alluded to the publication this afternoon by the Le Monde newspaper of extracts. According to the extracts, your daughter was employed by you, and your son also campaigned for Nicolas Sarkozy. Do you confirm this information? Well, let's talk about the work of parliamentary assistants. My second question concerns the parliamentary remuneration in the Senate that were over 11,000 euros was paid to you from the Senate. Regarding your second question, there are certain practices which I mentioned in my preliminary announcement, which are very old and which are no longer acceptable to French people today. Did I institute those practices? Am I under investigation today for those practices? No. Should they cease? Yes. And this has motivated me to propose to our fellow citizens that we should renew the status of elected officials so that they are completely transparent. My son has never participated in any presidential campaign. I told investigators that he helped me he provided me with some documentation to help me to organize my campaign, notably with regard to institutional issues. My daughter worked on many other topics, notably on the documentation for a book which I published. And this allows me to come back to the question of the work by parliamentary assistants. In France, we have a separation of powers. Nobody has the right to judge the content of the work done by parliamentary assistants, except the member of parliament for whom they work. The member of parliament is in charge of the recruiting assistants, remunerating them within the limits set by the parliament. The member of parliament is responsible for the content, for the work hours, for the place of work. Given the separation of powers, nobody has the right to monitor. Of course, the justice system has the right to check that there is a legal contract, that there is real work is being done, but the justice system cannot judge the quality of the work. Yes, my daughter had every right to work on the documentation for a political book which I wished to write, a book in which I raised some questions about the institutions. I even proposed suppressing the post of Prime Minister. So she played her part and I played my part in this. You said earlier that a new campaign is beginning this evening. Do you think you will be able to rally the Republicans and all those who have been criticizing you? What consequences will this have, do you think? There is no plan B. One of my friends said that it's not possible to have a plan B. Those who want me to withdraw from the presidential campaign are a small minority. Many of them had not voted for me in the primaries and perhaps they didn't accept the result of the primaries. They wanted to see me go. What counts are the messages of support which I've received. What counts is the strength of those who vote for the right. What counts are the men and women who work with me and who will be participating in the first strategic committee meeting of my campaign. The list will be published later, and all the people who really count in my political family will be there. You asked for 2 weeks. You said if you fall further in the polls, could you go back on your decision? Do you know what I think of opinion polls? I have had a lot of experience of opinion polls. For 2 years, I was told that I had no chance whatsoever of winning the primaries for the presidential elections. So opinion polls will not get me to change my opinions. No, nothing will make me change my decision. I am a candidate for the presidential elections and I'm in the campaign to win it. Prime Minister, the opinion polls indicate the majority of the French of the right still support you, but beyond that, a President of the Republic is not elected only by his political supporters, but he is elected to bring the French citizens together, to unite French citizens. Do you think you are in a good position to unite the French behind you? Yes, Mr. Majoral. When the truth will have been established, when everyone will have seen that what I've been accused of is defamation, is calumny, that it is completely in contradiction with the facts, the French will change their opinions. After dozens of hours of television programs where so-called experts talk about the role of parliamentary assistants and who all condemn me one after the other, I have heard very few voices defending me. And is that what you call the normal functioning of democracy? 3 months before the presidential elections, none of you has wondered why there has been so much violence in this campaign. Obviously, it is the press's role to report on events. The justice system must inquire, must carry out investigations when necessary, but the right bodies must be made responsible for this. But lynching, politically assassinating somebody, as you have done for 10 days, assassinating a presidential candidate poses a problem to our democracy. I'm convinced that the French are beginning to realize this and that you've gone too far. And today, many French people consider, because of the violence of the attacks against me, the lack of balance in the judgments made, that in the last resort, they must support the candidate who has a program of change, of real change, for the right. I would like to go back to what you've just said about the accusations against the power. You have talked about an institutional coup d'etat, and you have accused the government. Do you think, more precisely, are you thinking of Jean-Pierre Jouyet? You had a disagreement with him a few months ago. He is now the Secretary General of the Élysée. Are you thinking of the Minister of Justice? Are you thinking of the President of the Republic? Second question, you said that the people are legitimately changing their views regarding the legality of employing members of the family as parliamentary assistants. Do you envisage to pay back some of the money or the entire amount of money? So some of your friends have said that perhaps you should make a gesture. I think I've already answered that question. The money was legitimately earned by my wife and my children who worked. Regarding the first question, I have no answer. I have no idea. I am not accusing anybody. I'm simply saying that there are some troubling facts. Why? Is this campaign occurring now against me? Why didn't this campaign against me occur 8 months ago? Why did this information appear all of a sudden? Some facts go back over 20 years in the past, relating to activities which were legitimate with work contracts, income tax statements, and so on. And if I add what I've already said, that the public prosecutor's office started interviewing people within 24 hours, within 48 hours, and lawyers have themselves said that they're not competent. So there are a lot of strange facts. If you add the leaks, which I've just mentioned, it looks very much like a coup d'etat, and I don't have any body at my disposal to conduct an investigation. If you have any energy to do so, I invite you to do so. A question regarding what you have just said during this press conference. You underlined again that you're facing an institutional coup d'etat, and at the same time you have changed your communication strategy. You have submitted your excuses, presented your excuses to the French. Why didn't you do so earlier, for the reason that I indicated earlier? It took me a few days to recover from this accusation. I was destabilized. I wasn't expecting such a violent campaign. It did take me time to adjust, to react. It did take me time to measure the catastrophe that I have suffered. I recognize that I'm now standing up again, and I've chosen a new strategy, which I've just presented to you and to the French, which leads me to recognize that there are certain practices in our political life, which are old practices, which are no longer acceptable, and also to indicate that I'm not perfect by any means, but I've had a long political career which has led to a project for the recovery of our country, which has the support already of 4 million French citizens. You have talked about an attempt to assassinate you politically. Who's going to benefit? Who's going to benefit from this crime? The crime will benefit those who don't want the right to be present at the second round of the runoff of the presidential elections. Can you imagine if the right has no credible candidates at the presidential election, if we leave to Madame Le Pen the role of defending the right in the face of the other parties? So those who will benefit from this are those who don't support my program of change for France. You say that you're a victim of a media campaign. Do you regret having criticized Nicolas Sarkozy in the past? If you're alluding to a phrase in which I criticized Mr. Sarkozy, I said, if I am placed under investigation, I will not remain a candidate for the election. And I did say that General de Gaulle would never have stood for the presidency if he had been placed under investigation. The situation makes me think about the situation, but my determination remains entire. Perhaps I will take one more question.
Bonjour, Jean-Henri Boudot, BFM TV.
These accusations that you refer to will probably generate tensions among the people in your own camp. How do you plan to unite all those who support you and the right and the French? Well, I am now going to chair a meeting during which all the personalities you have just referred to will be present. Some people are against you still. Well, political life is like that. It's not my way of acting. What will count is that we're all going to come together and start a new campaign now, because there's no other solution. There's no plan B. If the right and the center wish to be present at the runoff of the presidential election 3 months before the elections, we must come together. We must unite. And this is what the vast majority of elected officials representing my political family have understood. And to conclude, may I remind you, as I said earlier, I'm not the candidate of a political party. I am now facing all French citizens. I have been designated by the primary elections. So I am now going to go on a tour of France every day. In both metropolitan France and overseas, I will be visiting the island of La Réunion, and I will be campaigning, and I'm convinced that all these forces that support me will come together, will unite, because deep down and in spite of the ambitions of one or two, they want France to recover. Thank you very much.